Hi everybody. Okay, so this evening I want to talk about the gods. Okay, now I'm not talking about the creator of the universe because I don't know that there is one. Right? There's absolutely no information or evidence to go on that would suggest that there's an almighty, omnipotent, omnipresent creator. Okay, I know that the Abrahamic God of the Bible or the Torah or the Quran is not the all-powerful, all-knowing, omnipresent, almighty God of the universe. Okay, those who say that he is make a jump from their reasoning that there's intelligent design of the universe to therefore my God of my religion is the right God who created everything. There's like nothing to join the dots from one assumption to the next. And I was having a conversation today and I stated that whether you're a Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever you are, right, Jew, it has nothing to do with anything other than the fact of where you were born. Okay, there's the old exception where people will convert from one religion to another, but for the most part, and in 90% of cases, it's where you're born, right? So if you tell me that the Bible is the word of God and the God of the Bible is true and the Bible's true and Christianity is true, I put it to you that you think that simply because you were born in a particular country and you were raised by a particular family and everything around you pointed to that. Okay, if you were born in Saudi Arabia, you wouldn't be having that conversation with me, most probably, because you would be a Muslim, right? Anyway, this is not what the video is about. I want to talk about the gods, okay, because you know, I've mentioned it in a previous video and I find it very interesting that animal sacrifice predates the Old Testament. Okay, so in the Old Testament, when they started slaughtering goats and sheep and what have you, that's not when it started. Okay, neither was it exclusive to the God Yahweh, because in the Bible it states that sacrifices were made to other gods, and the God of the Bible, Yahweh, hated that because he was a jealous God, right? And he wanted the devotion and worship. Okay, so there's been animal sacrifices, human sacrifices, all through time, and all parts of the world, all religions, not all, but many, right? And that's the point I'm making. Now, isn't that interesting? Okay. I would almost assume that the gods are the same gods or of the same race. Okay. Now, I believe that everyone in history that claim to have seen God, spoke to God, have dealings with God, right? All this God talk and all this whole God thing, and the things seen in the sky, and the things that are witnessed that are like supernatural, maybe, or maybe they're not supernatural, but they're extraordinary. Okay, could everyone be lying? Quite possibly. Or could everyone be deceived? Quite possibly. Or could there be something in it? Right, well, you see, if we go back to the very early writings, way before the Bible, right, the oldest writings in the world and the oldest texts were the Sumerian ones, and they spoke of a race of being called the Anunnaki, which I believe in the Hebrew, when they were Hebrew writers writing the Bible, they used the name Elohim, which is plural, means gods, means many. right? The Anunnaki are those who from heaven to earth came. Now, it's not just the Sumerian writings, but even the Egyptians, when they wrote about the pyramids, because they wrote everything as well, right? And they said that it was the sun gods, right? So everyone has these gods, right? Now, monotheism is a recent thing, right? So there wasn't really any monotheism. It was all gods, and you got, the gods in the sky, the chariots of fire, the wheel in the wheel, right, in Ezekiel, right? Now, in the old days, they did not know the word UFO. That was not a term. The Bible writers and the ancient writers could not write UFO or metallic objects, flying saucer. That language wasn't used. They used the language, they made sense of it in their heads the way they knew how. So in this modern day, we talk about extraterrestrials, UFOs, aliens, flying saucers, spaceships. We use that type of terminology, right? They didn't have that terminology back then, right? They said the gods. Okay, now Earth was, according to the texts, Earth was visited by the Anunnaki, right, who did make man in their image, but man was already here, right? They didn't create man from the dust of the ground, right? They came to the earth that was already here, and probably, maybe the earth had been here for millions of years, and there'd been many species of human living on the earth, maybe even something like a modern man that destroyed himself. Who's to say we haven't gone round and round in circles throughout time? I don't know, but it's possible. Okay. Now, the Anunnaki, the Elohim, they came to the earth. Earth was here, man was here, but they decided, well, we're going to, create man in our image, right? So they did a bit of DNA tweaking, right? Now, why is that far-fetched? Okay. Now, in this modern day, we've got scientists and they're geneticists, and they do they work with DNA, and they can do things with DNA, and they're talking about genetic modification. We're on the cusp of all this stuff now, right? So let's say you've got a race of beings from another planet that are like thousands of years older than us in their development, okay? Then who's to say that they weren't where we are at now then, right? So thousands of years ago, they were at technologically where we're at today, or maybe where we will be technologically in 1,000 years, right? I think it's very kind of naive to say that, we're the only people in the planet, in the universe or in the galaxy, and that we're the most intelligent. If there was a civilization that was a mere 100 years more developed than us, then what would their technology be like? You think about here on the Earth today, in 10 years, how much our technology leaps. Okay? So, yeah, it's possible that scientists came to the Earth when we were still cavemen, right? Or barely, evolved from the apes. Scientists could have came here and helped us along. They could have showed us how to make fire. They could have showed us how to build buildings, how to do basic things to develop us and to keep us going, right? And they could have changed our very makeup and created us in their image, right? It's all very possible. Now, why did they want sacrifice? Why did they want us to believe that we were in sin? Why did they, they created a totalitarian system of obedience or else, right? It was like laws laid down, right? So, yeah, there's these you talk about the Ten Commandments, but there was like a lot of laws, like nicky picky, right? And there was consequences for failing to fulfill these laws, man. I mean, brutal, you know. I mean, I was reading in the Bible recently about a man who was stoned for collecting sticks on the Sabbath. I mean, you know, the slightest foot wrong and you're dead. Yeah. But if you want to be absolved of your sin, then there was ways that you could do that by sacrificing the life of an innocent, by putting your shame, your guilt, your sin on an innocent being, and then that innocent being slaughtered in your place. Okay. Ultimately, God sent His Son to die on the cross, to be sacrificed so that we can be forgiven of sin. It makes absolutely no sense. It's not moral. It's sick. Why would anyone innocent need to be take on the punishment for a crime of anyone? And why are we punished for the crime of someone 2,000 years ago? I mean, there's question after question after question. I mean, what exactly was the crime 2,000 years ago? I spoke in my last video about how there was no knowledge of good and evil apparently in the Bible until the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil was eaten. Alright? So how did Adam and Eve know that it was wrong to eat the fruit? Well, you could say, well, because God said not to. Okay. Well, you know, it says in the Bible that they were deceived. Not that they deliberately went out their way to rebel and disobey God. It says that they were deceived. Everyone is deceived every day. You know, how many times have you been deceived this year? Is it your fault that you're deceived? You know, sometimes we're deceived and, you know, the person deceiving us is extremely persuasive and convincing and we think we're doing the right thing, right? Should you be punished for it? I don't think so. But anyway, I spoke about this in the last video quite a bit, so I'm not going to go around the houses and talk about it again. But yeah, so I believe that, you know, taking into account the plagiarism of the Bible and how, you know, the Bible is a compilation of many myths and legends and ancient writings and, you know, just kind of different names for characters and kind of compilated in a slightly different way, I think that we can assume that the gods, and I say gods, I know that, you know, all of you all are monotheistic, but you know, you go back to Hebrew, Elohim is not a singular god. It's always we and us in the Old Testament. Okay, I hear you saying, oh yeah, that's the Trinity, but the Trinity is a new idea, right? The Jews are the ones who, it's their book, right? Christianity came much later. The Jews never believed in a Trinity, right? It's the gods. It's the gods. You know, the Elohim. It's a race of being. It's a race of supreme being. Okay, more advanced being. And they're not immortal. They don't, they're not omnipresent. They travel in a spaceship. In spaceships. Now, how do I know that? Sounds far-fetched. I don't know that. I do not assert anything to be 100% true on my channel, okay? I must make that clear, right? Because everything has to be verified with evidence. And I am assuming, and it's not backed by evidence, but I tell you what, you join the dots and you can make some pretty intelligent assumptions. You look at ancient art, okay? In fact, I'm going to do a video on this around the corner. If you look at ancient art, okay, it's full of UFOs, you know, flying saucers. Before aeroplanes were invented, there was no aeroplanes invented when this art was done, right? And yet people were painting spaceships, you know, around like when Jesus was around, and you know what I mean? Like, what's that about? You know, why would people paint spaceships unless they had some concept of what they are? Anyway, it's just a few thoughts. I haven't gone into anywhere near the amount of things that I wanted to go into in this video, but I do try to keep my videos under 15 minutes. And yes, I've so much more to say, but there's no hurry. If you do like to listen to this type of content, then please subscribe and I will give more of this type of content. And thank you very much for listening, and